I didn't object when they said the house wasn't mine anymore, and I didn't argue when they gave me 48 hours to leave. They had no idea that right after graduation, I had already signed the documents that made their victory purely imaginary. When they return with the moving truck, they will learn that some doors might look open, but they have actually been locked tight for a very long time. My name is Hannah Hunter, and for 27 years, I have existed in the periphery of my own family. It is a strange sensation to be invisible in a room full of people who share your DNA, to speak and have your words dissolve into the air before they reach anyone's ears. In the Hunter family, there was a hierarchy that had been established long before I could form the words to challenge it. My younger sister, Blair, was the sun, a blazing, demanding star around which my parents orbited with desperate devotion. I was merely the dark matter in between, essential perhaps for holding the universe together, but ultimately unseen and uncelebrated. I learned my place early. If Blair wanted piano lessons, a baby grand appeared in the living room within a week. If I expressed an interest in painting, I was told to be practical and focus on my math homework. It was never explicit abuse. My parents were not monsters in the traditional sense. They clothed me, fed me, and paid for my education. But emotional neglect is a subtle poison. It is the birthday dinner where everyone orders what Blair likes because she is a picky eater. It is the family vacation planned entirely around Blair's dance competition schedule. It is the constant, grinding realization that your needs are an inconvenience while your sister's desires are mandates. The only place where this suffocating dynamic dissolved was at Seabriar Cove. My grandparents' estate was more than just a piece of property situated on the rugged coastline. It was a sprawling, weather-beaten Victorian home with cedar shingles that had turned a silvery gray from decades of salt spray. To my parents, it was a portfolio asset, a potential inheritance that they mentally calculated in terms of market value and capital gains. To Blair, it was a boring old house with bad Wi-Fi and drafty windows. But to me, it was a sanctuary. Grandma and Grandpa were the only people who truly saw me. When I was 16 and felt like the world was collapsing because my parents had forgotten to pick me up from soccer practice for the third time that month, it was Grandpa who drove 2 hours to get me, not saying a word of judgment, just handing me a thermos of hot cocoa. When I got into my dream university, but my parents suggested I go somewhere cheaper so they could afford a new car for Blair's sweet 16. It was Grandma who quietly transferred the tuition money into my account and told me to never apologize for my ambition. They were my real parents in every way that mattered. That is why, when their health began to decline 3 years ago, I did not hesitate. I was 24, trying to navigate the brutal landscape of early adulthood and holding down a job, but I became their primary caregiver. My parents were too busy with their social circles and their careers to be bothered with the messy, undignified reality of aging. They would visit once a month, sitting stiffly in the parlor, checking their watches, and making hollow comments about how quaint the house looked. They did not see the nights I spent sorting through confusing medical bills. They did not see me driving Grandpa to dialysis at 6 a.m. on Tuesdays and Thursdays. They did not see me holding Grandma's hand through the terror of her dementia episodes, reassuring her that she was safe, that I was there, that I was Hannah. Whenever I tried to discuss the logistics of their care with my mother, she would wave a hand dismissively and say, "Oh, Hannah, you are so good at the details. We trust you to handle it." It was not trust. It was abdication. They wanted the prestige of having wealthy, landed parents, but they wanted none of the responsibility that came with caring for them. I became the gatekeeper of Seabriar Cove, not out of a desire for power, but out of necessity. I managed the groundskeepers. I scheduled the roof repairs. I learned the intricacies of the plumbing system that dated back to 1950. I knew which floorboards creaked and which windows needed to be propped open with a book. When they passed away, 6 months apart, the grief was a physical weight that nearly crushed me. I felt like an orphan, despite my biological parents standing right next to me at the funeral. The service was a blur of black clothing and insincere condolences. I watched my father shake hands with people he hadn't spoken to in a decade, accepting their sympathy with a solemn nod, acting the part of the grieving son. I watched Blair cry dramatically into a lace handkerchief, despite the fact that she hadn't visited Grandma in the last year of her life, because the smell of the medicine grossed her out. I stood apart from them, dry-eyed and cold. My grief was private. It belonged to the quiet rooms of the house in Seabriar Cove, not here among these performers. In the aftermath, the will was read, and it was simple. The house was left to me. It was not a surprise to me, as Grandpa had told me his intentions clearly. "You are the only one who loves this place, Hannah," he had said, his voice raspy and weak in those final days. "Your mother sees dollar signs. Blair sees a party venue. You see a home. Promise me you will keep it. Promise me you won't let them strip it for parts." I had promised. However, the legal transfer of a multi-million-dollar estate to a 27-year-old was not something my family accepted with grace. At first, they were too shocked to react. They assumed there had been a mistake, or that I would naturally hand it over to the family pot to be managed by my father, who fancied himself a financial genius despite a track record of mediocre investments. For the first few months after the funeral, I lived at Seabriar Cove alone. I needed the solitude. I needed to mourn without performing. But as the weeks turned into months, and as I finished my final certification for my career, the atmosphere shifted. I graduated last week. It should have been a celebration of my own resilience, a moment to look forward to my future. Instead, it became the catalyst for their offensive. The questions started immediately after the ceremony. We were at a restaurant, a nice place overlooking the harbor, and before the appetizers even arrived, my mother cleared her throat. She had that specific look in her eyes, a faux concern that masked a predatory intent. "So, Hannah," she began, taking a sip of her wine, "now that you are done with school, we really need to discuss your living situation. Seabriar Cove is, well, it is a lot of house for one person, especially a young woman living alone." I cut a piece of bread, keeping my expression neutral. "I am managing just fine, Mom." "It is not just about managing, sweetie," my father chimed in, his voice booming with that paternal condescension I loathed. "It is about assets. That house is a massive tax burden. The upkeep alone must be draining your savings. We are just thinking about your future. You should be in the city, meeting people, not holed up in that old drafty mausoleum." "I like the mausoleum," I said calmly. Blair looked up from her phone, rolling her eyes. "Oh my God, Hannah, stop being so dramatic. It is weird that you live there. It is like you are haunting the place. Besides, I was thinking, if we sell it, the money could really set us all up. I have been looking at condos in the city, and the market is perfect right now." There it was, the we. The assumption that my inheritance was actually a communal resource that I was selfishly hoarding. "The house is not for sale," I said. My voice was quiet, but it was firm. The table went silent. My father put down his fork, the metal clinking sharply against the china. "Hannah, be reasonable. You do not have the income to sustain a property like that long term. We have been talking, your mother and I. We think it is best if you transfer the title to a family LLC. I will manage the finances. We will rent it out for the summers to cover the costs, and you can take a nice apartment closer to us. It takes the burden off your shoulders." They framed it as a rescue mission. They acted as if they were saving me from drowning, when in reality, they were trying to board the ship I had built and throw me overboard. I looked at them. I looked at my mother, who was checking her lipstick in the reflection of her spoon. I looked at my father, who was already mentally spending the commission he would make from managing the property. I looked at Blair, who felt entitled to the sweat off my brow simply because she existed. They did not ask about my job prospects. They did not ask if I was happy. They did not ask about the grief that still woke me up at 3 a.m. They asked about the deed. They asked about the equity. I realized then that the battle lines were not just being drawn. They had been painted in neon while I was busy grieving. They truly believed I was weak. They believed that because I had spent my life being the quiet one, the obedient one, the one who took care of the messy details while they enjoyed the view, that I would fold under the slightest pressure. They thought I was keeping the house out of stubbornness. They did not understand that I was keeping it because it was the only thing in the world that was mine. It was the only place where I was not second best. "I will think about it," I lied. My father smiled, a triumphant, shark-like grin. "Good girl. We will come by this weekend to look over the paperwork. There is some maintenance we need to assess anyway." "Sure," I said. "Come by." I did not tell them that I had a meeting scheduled for the next morning. I did not tell them that while they were planning how to divide the spoils of a war they thought they had already won, I was sharpening my own weapons. I finished my dinner, listening to Blair talk about her influencer dreams and my parents discuss their upcoming cruise. I felt a cold, hard knot form in my stomach. It was not fear. It was resolve. They saw a frightened girl clutching a set of keys she did not know how to use. They were about to find out that I was the one who changed the locks. The gravel in the driveway crunched under the tires of my father's sedan, exactly at 10 in the morning on Saturday. I was in the kitchen, washing a mug that had belonged to my grandfather, the ceramic warm against my palms. I did not move to the front door immediately. I stood there, listening to the car doors slam, the distinct click of my mother's heels on the stone walkway, and the heavier, authoritative tread of my father. They did not knock. They had keys, copies my mother had made years ago, just in case of emergencies, which she had never returned despite my polite requests. The front door swung open, bringing with it a gust of wind and the overwhelming scent of my mother's perfume, a floral fragrance that always seemed too sharp for the salty air of the coast. "Hannah?" Her voice floated down the hallway, pitched high and bright, feigning cheerfulness. "We brought pastries from that bakery in the city you used to like." I dried my hands and walked out to meet them. My mother was already in the living room, critically eyeing the dust motes dancing in a shaft of sunlight. She held a white bakery box like a peace offering, but her eyes were darting around the room, cataloging, assessing. She did not look at me. She looked at the curtains, the rug, the mantelpiece. "Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad," I said, keeping my voice even. My father walked past me without a hug, heading straight for the bay window. He ran a finger along the sill, checking for drafts. "Humidity is high in here," he announced, as if diagnosing a terminal illness. "You are not running the dehumidifier enough. That is how you get mold in the structural beams. Hannah, mold costs thousands to remediate." "I run it at night," I said, "to save on electricity." "Penny wise, pound foolish," he muttered, shaking his head. He turned to face me then, hands on his hips, wearing his weekend casual attire which cost more than my entire wardrobe. "Look, we need to have a serious talk about the reality of this place. I ran the numbers last night." I gestured to the dining table. "Do you want coffee?" "No coffee," my mother said, finally setting the box down on the coffee table but still refusing to meet my gaze. She began straightening a stack of magazines I had left on the side table, aligning their edges with neurotic precision. "We are just worried about you, honey. We barely slept last night thinking about the burden you are carrying." I sat down, but they remained standing, looming over me. It was a classic interrogation tactic, whether they realized they were doing it or not. "The property taxes are due in 3 months, my father said, diving right in. "Do you know what the assessment for a waterfront property in Seabriar Cove is this year? It is astronomical, and the insurance premiums have doubled because of the flood zone remapping. I looked at your salary. Hannah, I know what entry-level compliance officers make. You will be underwater by Christmas." "I have savings," I said quietly. "Grandpa left a stipend for the maintenance." "A stipend that will run out," my father countered, his voice rising. "And then what? You come to us? We are trying to prevent you from bankrupting yourself before your life even starts. You are 27. You should be traveling, dating, building a career, not shackling yourself to a sinking ship." My mother finally looked at me, her expression a mask of pained sympathy. "It is just too much for one person. Hannah, it is selfish of us to let you drown like this. We want to help. Then the front door opened again. I had not heard a second car. Blair breezed in, wearing oversized sunglasses and carrying a venti iced coffee. She did not say hello. She walked straight into the room, took a look at the antique armchair in the corner, my grandmother's favorite reading spot, and wrinkled her nose. God, it smells like old people in here, she declared. We need to rip out these carpets. Hardwood would open the space up so much more. And that wall? She pointed to the partition between the dining room and the kitchen. That has to go. Open concept is the only way to get the resale value up. I felt a spike of adrenaline in my chest. I am not remodeling. Blair? She pulled her sunglasses down, looking at me with genuine confusion. Well, you have to do something. It is depressing. I was telling Mom, if we turn the carriage house into a guest suite, I could host my retreats here in the summer. It would be perfect content. But not with this wallpaper. We? I asked. My father cleared his throat, stepping between me and Blair. That is what we wanted to discuss. Fairness. This family has always operated on fairness. Your grandparents. They were old. They were confused at the end. We all know that. They were not confused, I said, my voice shaking slightly. They left the house to you because you were the one here, my mother interjected smoothly, her tone soothing, like she was talking to a frightened animal. They didn't think about the long-term implications. They didn't think about how it would look to everyone else, how it would make Blair feel, how it would make us feel. It creates a divide. Hannah, we want to heal that divide. So, taking the house back heals the divide? I asked. Not taking, my father corrected sharply. Managing. We form a trust. The family controls the asset. You get a share. Blair gets a share. We manage the overhead. You can still visit. You can still have your little room. But the title needs to reflect the reality of the family structure. It is the only moral thing to do. There it was. The weaponized morality. If I kept the house, I was immoral. I was the cause of the family's fracture. If I gave it up, I was a good daughter. Blair sat on the edge of the table, swinging her legs. It is only fair. Hannah, you got the house and I got nothing? How does that look? Grandma loved me too. She would not have wanted me to be left out. You are basically stealing from me if you keep it all. I looked at them, my father, the intimidating financial authority, my mother, the emotional manipulator, Blair, the entitled beneficiary. They had rehearsed this. They had likely discussed it over dinner last night, agreeing on the talking points. Hit her with the taxes, hit her with the guilt, hit her with the fairness. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell them that Grandma left Blair nothing because Blair never called her back. I wanted to tell my father that his financial genius had lost them 30% of their portfolio last year. A fact I knew because I had seen the statements lying on his desk during Christmas. But I looked at their faces, and I realized something terrifying. They truly believed they were right. They had rewritten history in their heads to make themselves the victims and me the usurper. If I fought them now, if I yelled and cried and threw them out, they would escalate. They would call in favors. They would sue me for incompetence. They would find a way to declare Grandpa mentally unfit when he signed the will. They had money, and they had the conviction of the self-righteous. I needed to be smarter. I hear what you're saying, I said. My voice was low, submissive. My father's shoulders relaxed. My mother smiled. I need some time to process it, I continued, keeping my eyes on the floor. It is a big decision. The taxes are scary. You are right about that. Of course we are right, my father said, clapping a hand on my shoulder. It felt heavy, like a yoke. We are protecting you. Look, I will have our lawyer draft up a transfer agreement. Just a draft. You can look at it. No pressure. But we should get this moving before the fiscal year ends. Okay, I said. Send the draft. Blair hopped off the table. Great. Now, can we talk about the pool? There is space in the backyard for an infinity pool if we cut down those ugly oak trees. Those trees are 200 years old, I whispered. They block the view, she said dismissively. They stayed for another hour. Blair took measurements of the living room. My mother went through the kitchen cupboards, throwing out spices she claimed were expired. My father walked around the perimeter of the house, tapping on the siding and making notes on his phone. I sat at the table and did nothing. I let them violate the space. I let them plan the destruction of my sanctuary. When they finally left, promising to return the following weekend with concrete plans, I locked the door. I waited until the sound of their engine faded completely into the distance. Then, I went to my room and pulled a black, hardcover notebook from under my mattress. I sat at my desk and opened it to the first blank page. Date: May 22nd. Time: 10:15 in the morning. Attendees: Mother, Father, Blair. Father stated, "The family controls the asset. Admitted to running numbers on my private salary without my consent." Mother stated, "Grandparents were confused. Implied mental incompetence to contest the will." Blair stated, "Intent to remove oak trees and renovate. Claimed I am stealing from her." Father threatened, "You will be underwater by Christmas." Coercion based on financial fear. I wrote down everything. I transcribed the conversation as best as I could remember, word for word. I noted their tone. I noted the specific threats about the taxes and the insurance. I logged the time they arrived and the time they left. I did not cry. The time for tears had passed. They thought I was the same Hannah who used to hide in her room while they ignored her. They thought my silence was submission. They did not know that silence is also how you hunt. I closed the notebook. I had promised Grandpa I would not let them strip this house for parts. I intended to keep that promise, but I knew now that I could not do it alone. I needed armor. I needed a shield that was stronger than guilt and sharper than my father's financial bullying. I picked up my phone. I did not call my parents. I did not call a contractor. I opened the browser and searched for a name my grandfather had mentioned only once, years ago, when he was warning me about the vultures of the world. I needed a lawyer who understood that family is just another word for people who think they own you. The office of Calder and Wynn Legacy Group was located on the 42nd floor of a steel and glass tower in the financial district, a world away from the salt spray and cedar shingles of Seabriar Cove. The reception area smelled of expensive leather and old paper, a scent that immediately calmed the frantic rhythm of my heart. I had chosen this firm specifically because they had no connection to my family's social circle. My father is golf buddies and my mother is charity committee friends did not come here. This was a place for serious wealth protection, the kind that whispered rather than shouted. I sat in a high-backed chair, clutching my handbag with white-knuckled intensity. Inside was the black notebook, now filled with 3 days of meticulous notes. When the receptionist called my name, I stood up, smoothed my skirt, and walked into the office of Arthur Wynn. He was a man in his late 60s, with silver hair and eyes that looked like they had seen every variety of human greed imaginable. He did not smile when I entered. He simply gestured to the chair opposite his desk and waited. "Ms. Hunter," he said, his voice dry and precise. "You mentioned on the phone that you have concerns regarding the security of a recently inherited estate." "I do," I said. I did not waste time with pleasantries. I reached into my bag and pulled out the notebook. I placed it on the mahogany desk between us. My grandparents left me their home in Seabriar Cove. The will was probated without issue. The title is in my name. However, my family, my parents and my sister, are currently applying significant pressure to force me to transfer the deed to a family-controlled entity. Arthur Wynn looked at the notebook, then back at me. Define pressure. Emotional manipulation initially, I stated, keeping my voice steady. Guilt trips about fairness, but it has escalated. My father has begun questioning my financial competence. He has threatened that I will be bankrupt by Christmas. He has implied that he will contest the will by claiming my grandparents were mentally incompetent. They have keys to the property and have begun discussing renovations without my consent. I opened the notebook to the page dated May 22nd. Here, my father stated, "The family controls the asset. My sister stated that if I keep the house, I am stealing from her. They have given me a deadline to review a transfer draft. Arthur Wynne picked up the notebook. He read the page I had indicated, then flipped back a few pages, his eyes scanning my handwriting. The silence in the room was absolute. I could hear the hum of the air conditioning and the distant wail of a siren 42 stories below. Finally, he closed the notebook and placed his hands on top of it. Ms. Hunter, what you are describing is the textbook definition of undue influence, bordering on constructive fraud depending on how far they take it, he said. His tone was clinical, devoid of pity, which was exactly what I needed. If they can prove, or even successfully argue in a deposition, that you are incapable of managing the asset, or that you were coerced into holding it against the family as interest, they can tie you up in litigation for years. Even if they lose, the legal fees will drain your liquidity, forcing you to sell the house to pay the lawyers. That is usually the strategy. I felt a cold chill slide down my spine. That is what I thought. They know I cannot afford a long war. Correct, Wynne said. They are banking on your liquidity issues. They know that a 27-year-old generally does not have the reserves to fight a protracted estate battle against established wealth. They do not need to win in court. They just need to bleed you dry until you surrender. He leaned back in his chair, tenting his fingers. However, there is a preemptive strike available to you. It is aggressive, and it is permanent, but it stops the conversation immediately. Tell me, I said. We move the asset out of your name, he said. I blinked, but that is what they want. No, Wynne corrected. They want you to move the asset into a structure they control. I am suggesting you move the asset into a structure that nobody controls, not even you. Technically, I am suggesting an irrevocable trust. He stood up and walked to a whiteboard on the wall, picking up a black marker. He drew a box. Right now, the house is here, he said, writing Hannah inside the box. It is exposed. It is a personal asset. It can be sued. It can be liened. It can be argued over. If you marry and divorce, it is marital property. If you are sued for a car accident, it is liable. He drew a second box, much thicker than the first. He wrote the Hunter Legacy Trust inside it. We create this entity, he explained. You transfer the deed of Seabriar Cove into this trust. You also transfer the maintenance stipend your grandfather left you. Once those assets are in the trust, they no longer belong to Hannah Hunter. They belong to the trust. And the difference is? I asked. The difference, he said, turning to look at me, is the word irrevocable. Once you sign those papers, you cannot take the house back out. You cannot sell it and keep the money for yourself personally. You cannot change the terms just because you feel like it, and more importantly, your family cannot touch it. They cannot sue you for the house because you do not own it. The trust owns it. But who controls the trust? I asked. The trustee, he said. The trustee manages the property, pays the bills from the trust's accounts, and ensures the terms of the trust are followed. The terms can be written to state that the property is to be preserved for the use and enjoyment of the primary beneficiary for her lifetime. And who is the beneficiary? You, he said. And the trustee? Also you, he said. You appoint yourself as the sole trustee. You act as the manager. You live there as the beneficiary. But legally, the asset is locked in a vault. If your father demands you transfer the deed to him, you can honestly say, I cannot. I do not own it. The trust owns it, and the trust documents forbid transfer to any outside party. I stared at the whiteboard. It was brilliant. It was a cage, yes. But it was a cage where I held the key from the inside. It turned my ownership from a vulnerable personal right into a rigid legal obligation. If I do this, I asked, can they contest the trust? It is extremely difficult to pierce an irrevocable trust once it is funded and recorded, especially if we establish that you were of sound mind and acting on your own free will. Wynne replied, We will film the signing. We will have independent witnesses. We will have a competency affidavit. We will build a wall so high they will break their necks trying to climb it. He paused, his expression hardening. "But you must understand the gravity of this, Ms. Hunter. This is not a half measure. Once we file this, the house is effectively removed from the market. You cannot wake up in 5 years, decide you want to move to Paris, and sell the house to buy a condo there. The proceeds of any sale would have to stay inside the trust. You are binding your life to this property." I thought about the oak trees my sister wanted to cut down. I thought about my grandfather's mug in the sink. I thought about the silence of the library where I had spent my childhood reading while my parents threw parties downstairs. "I am already bound to it," I said. "Do it." Wynne nodded, a flicker of respect crossing his face. "Very well. We will need to move quickly. If they file any sort of injunction or lis pendens against the title before we record the deed transfer, it freezes everything. We need to draft the trust instrument, execute the deed, and record it with the county clerk before your family makes their next move." "They are coming back next weekend," I said. "They said they are bringing paperwork." "Then we will have ours finished by Friday," Wynne said. "I will have my paralegals start drafting immediately. We will name the trust something obscure, something that does not immediately flag their attention if they are casually searching records." "The Seabrier Preservation Trust," I suggested. "Good," he said. "Now, regarding the assets, you mentioned a maintenance stipend." $200,000, I said. "It is in a separate savings account." "We will move that into the trust's bank account," he instructed. "That money becomes the trust's principal. You will use it to pay the taxes and insurance. Since the trust owns the house, the trust pays the bills. It further cements the legitimacy of the entity. It shows you are treating this as a business arrangement, not a personal piggy bank." He sat back down and pulled a yellow legal pad toward him. "One final thing. Ms. Hunter, and this is the most important part." "Yes?" "Silence," he said. "You cannot tell them what you are doing. You cannot threaten them with it. You cannot use it as leverage in an argument until the deed is recorded and the ink is dry. If they catch wind that you are moving the asset, they will file an emergency temporary restraining order to stop the transfer. They will claim you are dissipating family assets. You must continue to play the part of the confused, overwhelmed daughter. Let them believe they are winning." "I can do that," I said. "I have been doing that my whole life." "Good," Wynne said, "because from this moment forward, you are not just a granddaughter defending a home. You are the trustee of a legal entity. You need to think like a fiduciary. No emotion, only adherence to the document." He outlined the fee structure, which was substantial, likely eating up a significant chunk of my personal savings. But I did not flinch. It was the price of freedom. We spent the next hour going over the specific clauses. I insisted on a clause that explicitly stated the property could never be used for commercial purposes. Blocking Blair is retreat idea forever. I added a clause that gave the trustee absolute discretion over who was allowed on the premises, giving me the legal right to ban them from the property if necessary. When I walked out of the Calder and Wynne Legacy Group building, the sun was setting, casting long, sharp shadows across the city streets. I felt different. The dread that had been sitting heavy in my stomach for weeks had evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from my mother. "Just checking in. Sweetie, Dad found a great contractor who can start on the roof next month. We will discuss the details on Saturday. Love you." I looked at the message. A week ago, it would have made me panic. It would have made me feel small and helpless. Now, I just saw it for what it was. Evidence. I typed back, careful to keep my tone light and compliant. "Sounds good. Mom, see you Saturday." I put the phone away and walked toward the subway. I had 3 days to gather every financial document I owned. I had 3 days to maximize the deception. I was going to let them walk into my home, let them spread their blueprints on my table, and let them believe they owned me, right up until the moment the trap snapped shut. I was no longer just Hannah. I was the trustee, and the Seabrier Preservation Trust was about to close its doors to the Hunter family forever. Thursday morning arrived with a sky the color of bruised slate, a grim backdrop that felt appropriate for what I was about to do. I had taken a personal day from my job at Blue Haven Compliance Solutions, telling my manager I had a dental emergency. It was a lie, but not entirely. I was about to perform an extraction, removing the rot from my life before it could spread any further. I sat in the conference room at Calder and Wynn for the second time in 3 days. The table was covered in documents, a sea of white paper that represented the total sum of my grandfather's legacy. Arthur Wynn sat across from me, his hands clasped, watching me with that same clinical detachment. Beside him sat a notary public, a woman named Mrs. Higgins, who looked like she would rather be anywhere else. "Are you ready, Ms. Hunter?" Arthur asked. "Once we begin, the chain of title is broken. The property leaves your hands." "I am ready," I said. The process was not dramatic. There was no thunderclap, no sudden gust of wind. It was just the scratch of a pen against paper. I signed my name at the bottom of the trust agreement. Hannah Hunter, grantor. Then, I signed again on the next line. Hannah Hunter, trustee. I watched Mrs. Higgins stamp the document. The heavy thud-clack of the embosser was the only sound in the room. That sound was the final nail in the coffin of my parents' ambitions. We moved on to the deed of transfer. This was the physical instrument that moved the house at Seabriar Cove from Hannah Hunter, a single woman, to the Seabriar Preservation Trust, dated May 25th. I stared at the legal description of the property, the metes and bounds, the coordinates that defined the place I loved most in the world. By signing this, I was technically making myself a tenant in my own home, but I was a tenant with an unbreakable lease, and my landlord was a piece of paper that answered only to me. "And the funding," Arthur said, sliding the next stack toward me. This was the transfer of the liquid assets. The $200,000 my grandfather had left for maintenance, plus $50,000 of my own personal savings that I had scraped together over 5 years of working. I was draining my personal accounts to the bare minimum. If my father checked my credit or my bank balances, which I wouldn't put past him, he would see a young woman with very little to her name. He would see vulnerability. He would see exactly what he wanted to see. He would not see the new bank account opened this morning under the trust tax identification number, sitting flush with $250,000. "Done," I said, capping the pen. Arthur gathered the papers efficiently. "I will have the deed recorded with the county clerk electronically within the hour. By noon, it will be public record, though it will take weeks for the online databases to update. Unless your father goes physically to the courthouse basement today, he will not know." "He won't," I said. "He hates government buildings. He thinks the lines are beneath him." "We have also set up the monitoring service," Arthur added. "Any inquiry into the title, any lien filed, any permit application pulled on the address, you will be notified immediately via a secure portal, and per your instruction, all correspondence regarding the property, including tax bills and insurance notices, will be routed to a post office box in the city, which we manage. Nothing goes to the house. Nothing goes to your parents' address." I stood up, my legs feeling slightly unsteady, not from fear, but from the immense release of tension. "Thank you, Arthur." "Do not thank me yet," he said, standing to shake my hand. "The paperwork is the easy part. Living the lie until the trap is sprung. That is the hard part. You have to go back to work tomorrow. You have to answer their calls. You have to let them believe they are winning." "I know," I said. I left the office and walked out into the cool, gray afternoon. I felt lighter, as if gravity had released its hold on me just a fraction. I was walking down the street, surrounded by thousands of strangers, and I carried a secret that had the power to destroy my family's carefully constructed reality. The next morning, I returned to Blue Haven Compliance Solutions. My job was not glamorous. I spent my days analyzing corporate adherence to regulatory frameworks, staring at spreadsheets, and flagging discrepancies. It was dry, meticulous work, but it had taught me one crucial lesson. The devil is always in the details, and if you control the paperwork, you control the outcome. I sat in my cubicle, responding to emails, while my phone buzzed intermittently on the desk. It was Friday, the deadline my father had set. At 10 in the morning, a text from my mother popped up. Hannah, darling, Dad is asking if you have looked over the draft for the family LLC yet? We really need to get this moving. The market is fluctuating. I let the message sit there for 20 minutes. I typed a response, deleted it, and typed another. It had to be perfect. It had to sound like the Hannah they knew. Hesitant, overwhelmed, pliable. I am looking at it now. Mom, I wrote, it is just a lot of legal language. I am a bit confused by the management fee section. Can we talk about it when you come down tomorrow? I hit send. The response was immediate. Of course, don't worry about the fees. That is just standard language. We will explain everything. Just have the house ready for us. They took the bait. My confusion was their green light. They interpreted my hesitation not as resistance, but as stupidity. They thought they just needed to pat me on the head and explain the big words, and I would sign whatever they put in front of me. By lunch, the assault had shifted fronts. Blair began her offensive. My sister did not call. Blair did not like real-time conversations where she might have to listen. She communicated in images and demands. My phone lit up with a barrage of notifications from a messaging app. Image sent. Image sent. Image sent. I opened them. They were photos of high-end furniture, a white linen sectional sofa that would be ruined by a single grain of sand, a glass coffee table with sharp, modern angles, a set of abstract art pieces that looked like gray smudges. The vibe for the living room, Blair wrote. We need to get rid of Grandma's heavy drapes. They are so depressing. I am thinking we rip out the window seats too. Make it more open. I stared at the screen. The window seats were where I had spent every rainy afternoon of my childhood. They were hand-carved by my great-grandfather. My instinct was to type back, over my dead body. I took a deep breath. I remembered Arthur Wynn's voice. Let them believe they are winning. That looks very modern, I typed back. Right? Blair replied. I already talked to a designer friend of mine. She can get us a discount if we order everything next week. Dad said he would front the money once the LLC is set up. You are going to love it. Hannah, it will finally look like a place where cool people actually want to hang out. The insult was casual, tossed in at the end like an afterthought. I was not cool people. I was just the caretaker of the venue for her future popularity. I am sure it will look different, I replied. Totally, she wrote. Oh, and move your stuff out of the master bedroom. I think I should take that room since I will be hosting the retreats. You can take the attic room. It is cozy. The attic room, the small, uninsulated space where we stored the Christmas decorations. She was demoting me to storage. I put the phone face down on my desk. My hands were trembling, not with sadness, but with a cold, burning rage. They were carving up the carcass of my life before I was even dead. They were allocating rooms, planning demolitions, and spending money they did not have on a house they did not own. I went back to my work. I focused on a compliance report for a mid-sized logistics firm. I flagged 3 violations of safety protocols. I recommended fines. I was good at this. I was good at seeing where people thought they could cut corners and showing them the consequences of their arrogance. My family thought they could cut corners with me. They thought they could bypass respect, bypass the law, and bypass my dignity because they assumed I was too weak to enforce the regulations of basic decency. Throughout the afternoon, the silence from my end seemed to embolden them. Since I wasn't fighting back, they assumed the war was over. My father sent an email with the subject line, Updated Tax Strategy. I didn't open it. I simply moved it to a folder I had named Evidence. I left work at 5. The city was loud, chaotic, and indifferent. I took the train out to Seabriar Cove, watching the landscape change from concrete to marshland, to the familiar scrub pine and dunes of the coast. When I arrived at the house, the sun was setting, painting the sky in violent streaks of purple and orange. The house stood silhouetted against the light, its Victorian peaks sharp and defiant. It looked solid. It looked immovable. I walked up the steps and unlocked the door. The key turned smoothly. I walked into the living room. It was exactly as my grandparents had left it. The heavy drapes were there, The window seats were there. The smell of old books and cedar was there. Blair wanted to turn this into a white, sterile box. My father wanted to turn it into a tax write-off. My mother wanted to turn it into a status symbol. I walked to the mantelpiece and picked up a framed photo of my grandfather and me, taken when I was 10. We were fishing off the pier. He was smiling. That crooked, genuine smile he never showed my father. "It is done, Grandpa," I whispered into the quiet room. I went to the kitchen and made tea. I did not pack. I did not move my clothes to the attic. I did not clear out the master bedroom. Instead, I sat at the dining table and organized the paperwork Arthur had given me. I placed the stamped, recorded deed of transfer in a blue folder. I placed the trust agreement in a red folder. I placed the bank receipt showing the funded account in a white envelope. I aligned them perfectly on the corner of the table. Then I went upstairs to the master bedroom, my bedroom, and slept more soundly than I had in years. I knew they were coming tomorrow. I knew they would arrive with their contractors and their color swatches and their condescending smiles. Let them come. The fortress was built. The drawbridge was up, and they were marching straight into the moat. The sudden onset of affection is the most alarming symptom of a toxic family. For years, I had been an afterthought, a calendar invite sent out of obligation rather than desire. But in the week following my visit to the law firm, the dynamic shifted with a jarring, artificial intensity. The invitations came in a flood. Tuesday night pasta, Thursday evening cocktails, Sunday brunch. They were suffocating me with presence, trying to squeeze the compliance out of me through sheer proximity. I accepted every invitation. I sat at their dining tables, ate their food, and let them think they were wearing me down. The Tuesday dinner was the first test. My mother had cooked a roast, filling the house with the smell of rosemary and garlic, a scent that used to comfort me but now turned my stomach. We were halfway through the meal when my father set his knife down. The clatter of silver against china was sharp, a signal that the pleasantries were over. "Hannah," he said, wiping his mouth with a napkin. "I was thinking about the filing system at the house. You know, Grandpa was terrible at keeping records. A lot of his files were disorganized." I took a sip of water, watching him over the rim of the glass. "I organized them last year. Dad, everything is filed by year and category." Sure, he said, waving a hand dismissively. "But I mean the core documents, the original deed, the land survey from 1998, the flood elevation certificates. Do you actually have those in your physical possession? Or are they sitting in some dusty box in the attic where moisture can get to them?" The question was too specific. He was not asking about organization. He was asking about location. He wanted to know if I had the keys to the castle within reach, or if they were vulnerable. "They are safe," I said vaguely. "I have them in a fireproof box." "Where?" he pressed. "In the house? You know, if there is a fire, those small boxes do not hold up for long. It would be safer if we kept the originals here, in my wall safe. Just for safekeeping. You can keep copies." "I think I am okay keeping them with me for now," I said, forcing a small, naive smile. "I like having them close. It makes me feel responsible." My father's jaw tightened. He exchanged a quick, loaded glance with my mother. It was a look of frustration, the look of a predator realizing the prey has moved slightly out of range. "Well," he said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming serious and paternal, "just make sure you do not lose them. Reconstituting a chain of title is a nightmare. We are just trying to help you avoid a disaster. Hannah, you are prone to losing things. Remember when you lost your retainer in the 7th grade? He was bringing up a mistake from 15 years ago to undermine my competence as an adult. It was pathetic, but it was also dangerous. He was building a narrative of incompetence. 2 days later, the pressure shifted from psychological to digital. I was at my desk at Blue Haven, reviewing a compliance audit, when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Blair. Usually, Blair only texted me to ask where I had bought a specific sweater or to complain about Mom. This time, she sent a hyperlink without any context. I clicked it. The link led to a website called DocuEdit Fast, a service that advertised the ability to modify PDF text seamlessly and edit scanned documents with AI precision. I stared at the screen, a cold knot forming in my throat. Why would my sister send me a tool for altering legal documents? I texted her back. What is this? Her reply came 3 minutes later, breezy and dismissive. Oh, wrong person. Sorry, I was sending that to a friend who needs to fix her resume. But actually, you might need it. Dad said the draft for the LLC he sent you might have some typos. That app lets you fix them before you print it out. It was a lie so thin it was transparent. You do not use a document forger to fix typos on a draft. You just ask for a new draft. Blair was clumsy, but her clumsiness revealed their intent. They were looking into how to alter documents. Were they planning to change the dates on an old letter from Grandpa? Were they planning to forge a signature on a transfer deed if I refused to sign? I did not reply. I took a screenshot of the text exchange and uploaded it to the encrypted cloud folder Arthur Wynne had set up for me. That afternoon, the external probe began. I received a text message from a number I did not recognize. Area code 212, New York City. Hi, Hannah. This is Marcus from Vantage Capital. I heard through a mutual contact that the Hunter estate at Seabriar Cove might be coming to market soon. We are very interested in an off-market cash deal. Can we chat? My hands froze over my keyboard. A mutual contact. I had not told a soul the house was for sale. In fact, I had explicitly told my family I wasn't selling. The only way Marcus from Vantage Capital would know to contact me was if someone was shopping the property around behind my back, testing the waters to see what kind of price they could get. My father was already soliciting offers. He was so confident he could bully me into signing the transfer that he was already lining up a buyer to flip the house the moment the ink was dry. I did not respond to Marcus. I blocked the number. Then I forwarded the screenshot to Arthur. I walked out to the parking lot on my lunch break, needing to speak where no one could hear me. The air was humid, sticking to my skin. I dialed Arthur's direct line. They are shopping the house, I said the moment he picked up. I just got a text from an investor. That is aggressive, Arthur said, his voice calm and grounding. But not illegal. They can talk to whoever they want. They just cannot sell what they do not own. Blair sent me a link to a document editing service, I added. I think they might try to forge something, maybe a power of attorney, if they claim I am incompetent. If they forge a power of attorney, that is a felony, Arthur said. And we are ready for it. Listen to me. Hannah, we have the deed recorded. The trust is the owner. If they try to file a forged deed now, it will be flagged immediately because it will conflict with the transfer we just executed. The county clerk will reject it because Hannah Hunter no longer has the right to transfer the property. The trust does. But they do not know that yet, I whispered. Exactly, Arthur said. And that is why you are safe. They are trying to pick a lock on a door that has already been bricked over. Let them try. Every suspicious text, every link Blair sends, every conversation your father has with an investor, it is all evidence of bad faith. If this ever goes to court, we will paint them as conspirators who were trying to defraud you. I feel like I'm walking through a minefield, I said. You are not in the minefield. Hannah, Arthur corrected me. You are the one holding the detonator. You just haven't pressed the button yet. Stay calm. Keep documenting. When are you seeing them next? Saturday, I said. They are coming to the house with the final paperwork for the LLC. Good, Arthur said. Let them come. Let them present the papers. Read them. Ask questions. Do not sign anything, but do not tell them about the trust yet. Let them commit fully to their course of action. I hung up and went back to work. I forced myself to focus on spreadsheets, on regulations, on the mundane details of compliance. It was a meditation. It reminded me that the world operated on rules, and for the first time in my life, I had used those rules better than my father. Friday night passed in a blur of anxiety. I stayed at Seabriar Cove, checking the locks 3 times before bed. I kept the black notebook on my nightstand. Every time I heard a car drive by on the main road, I tensed. half expecting my father to burst in with a notary and a pen. But Saturday morning came with a bright, mocking sunshine. At 9 in the morning, the familiar crunch of tires on gravel announced their arrival. I watched from the upstairs window. This time, it wasn't just my parents and Blair. There was another man with them. He was tall, wearing a cheap suit that fit poorly around the shoulders. He carried a briefcase. My father looked up at the house, shielding his eyes from the sun. He looked like a general surveying a battlefield he had already conquered. He pointed at the roof, saying something to the man in the suit. I took a deep breath. I smoothed the front of my dress. I checked my phone one last time to make sure the audio recording app was running in the background, the screen locked and dark. I walked downstairs to open the door. "Hannah!" my mother cried out as I stepped onto the porch. She rushed forward to hug me, her embrace tight and performative. "You look tired, honey. Have you been sleeping? I told your father. This place is just too much work for you." "I am fine, Mom," I said, stepping back out of her reach. My father stepped up onto the porch, the wood creaking under his weight. He did not hug me. He gestured to the man in the suit. "Hannah, this is Mr. Henderson," my father said. "He is a notary, and he has drafted the final operating agreement for the Hunter Family LLC. We are going to get this sorted out today so you can stop worrying." "Mr. Henderson nodded at me, a tight professional smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Ms. Hunter." "Come in," I said. I led them into the dining room. I had cleared the table of everything except a vase of fresh hydrangeas I had cut from the garden that morning. They were blue and defiant. My father sat at the head of the table, naturally assuming the position of power. He opened his leather portfolio and pulled out a thick stack of documents. He placed them in the center of the table. "Here is the reality. Hannah," he said, his voice taking on that lecturing tone I hated. "I had a long talk with our accountant. If we do not move the property into this LLC by the end of the month, the capital gains implications for the future are going to be disastrous. We are doing this to save you money." "And to protect the house," my mother added softly. "Right," my father said. "Now, the way this works is simple. You sign the deed transfer here, moving the house into the LLC. You sign the operating agreement here, which names me as the manager of the LLC. You, Blair, and Mom are silent members. You get shares. It ensures the house stays in the family forever." He uncapped a heavy, expensive pen and set it down on top of the papers. It pointed at me like a loaded gun. "We need to do this now. Hannah," Blair said, looking at her phone. "I have a contractor coming at 2 to look at the wall removal." I looked at the pen. I looked at the papers. I could see the title at the top. Quitclaim deed. They had brought a notary. They had brought the documents. They were trying to ambush me in my own dining room. I sat down slowly. I did not pick up the pen. "Can I read it first?" I asked. My father sighed, an exaggerated exhalation of air. "Hannah, it is standard legal boilerplate. We paid a lot of money to have this drafted. You are not going to understand half the terms." "I would still like to read it," I said. "Fine," he snapped. "Read it, but Mr. Henderson charges by the hour." I pulled the stack of papers toward me. I pretended to read. In reality, I was just letting the silence stretch, letting the tension build in the room until it was thick enough to choke on. I watched Blair tap her foot. I watched my mother pick at a loose thread on the placemat. I watched my father's face turn a slow, simmering red. They were so sure of themselves. They were so sure that I was the same scared little girl who just wanted to be loved. I turned the page. "Okay," I said softly. "I have read enough." "Great," my father said, pushing the pen closer. "Sign by the yellow tab." I looked at him. I looked him dead in the eye for the first time in years. "No," I said. The word hung in the air, small but absolute. "Excuse me?" my father asked, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "I said no," I repeated. "I am not signing this." "Hannah," my mother warned, her voice trembling. "Do not be difficult. We are trying to help you." "I do not need help," I said. And I am not signing over my house. My father stood up. The chair scraped violently against the floorboards. Your house? It is not your house. You ungrateful little— He stopped himself. Glancing at the notary, he took a breath, composing himself, but his eyes were cold and hard. You are making a mistake, a massive mistake. If you do not sign this— Hannah, I am telling you right now, we will take steps. We will have you declared incompetent. We will drag you through court until you do not have a dime left. Is that a threat? I asked, my voice steady. It is a promise, he spat. You are not capable of managing this estate. You are a child playing house. I am giving you one last chance, Blair said, standing up too. Sign the paper, Hannah, or we are done. Like, family done. I looked at them. The masks were off. The concern was gone. The love was gone. There was only greed and control. I think you should leave, I said. My father laughed, a harsh barking sound. Leave? This is my parents' house. I am not going anywhere until this is signed. It is my house, I said, and you are trespassing. My father leaned across the table, his face inches from mine. You have until Monday. If this document is not signed by noon on Monday, the moving trucks are coming anyway, and the lawyers are coming with them. He grabbed the papers, shoved them back into his portfolio, and signaled to the notary, Let's go. She needs time to think about the consequences. They stormed out. The door slammed so hard the windows rattled. I sat in the silence of the dining room. My heart was pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. I picked up my phone and stopped the recording. I had the threat. I had the witness of the notary. Even if he was on their side, he had seen my refusal. I texted Arthur. They just left. They threatened to declare me incompetent. They gave me a deadline of Monday noon. Arthur replied instantly, Perfect. They have just confirmed they are hostile. Stay put. Monday is going to be interesting. I walked to the window and watched their car disappear down the driveway. I was shaking, but not from fear. I was shaking from the adrenaline of finally standing my ground. Calm is strategy. I went to the kitchen and poured the rest of the tea down the sink. I did not need tea. I needed to prepare for the final act, because on Monday, they weren't just bringing lawyers, they were bringing their arrogance, and I was going to break it. Monday arrived with the heaviness of a judgment day. The air at Seabriar Cove was stagnant, holding the humidity of the weekend in a suffocating embrace. I had spent the morning working remotely. My laptop open on the kitchen island, but my eyes were constantly drawn to the driveway. I was not working, I was waiting. At 12 o'clock sharp, they appeared. This was not the casual arrival of the previous weekend. There were no pastries, there were no tentative pleasantries. My father's sedan pulled up, followed closely by a black SUV I did not recognize. Doors opened in unison. My father stepped out, adjusting his tie. My mother smoothed her skirt. Blair exited the back seat, holding a thick manila envelope like a weapon she had been dying to fire. They walked to the front door in a phalanx. They did not knock. The door was unlocked. I had left it that way intentionally, and they swept into the hallway with the energy of a SWAT team conducting a raid. I stood in the archway of the kitchen, a mug of cold coffee in my hand. Pack your bags. Hannah, my father said. He did not say hello. He did not ask how I was. He walked straight to the dining table and slammed his briefcase down. It is done. My mother lingered by the door, refusing to look at me. She was wringing her hands, a nervous tic she developed whenever my father was executing one of his business maneuvers. We did not want it to come to this, sweetie. You have to understand that. Come to what? I asked, my voice flat. Blair stepped forward. She was wearing a smirk that she was trying very hard to suppress. She tossed the manila envelope onto the dining table. It slid across the polished wood and stopped inches from my hand. Read it, Blair said. Or don't. It does not matter anymore. I walked to the table. I could feel their eyes on me. 3 pairs of lasers burning into my skin. I opened the envelope. Inside was a stack of heavy bonded paper. The top document was titled, Notice of Title Transfer and Emergency Guardianship Order. I scanned the text. It was a masterpiece of legal intimidation. It claimed that due to demonstrated financial instability and incapacity to manage estate assets, the title of the Seabriar Cove property had been transferred via a retroactive power of attorney clause allegedly found in my grandfather's archives. It stated that the Hunter Family LLC was now the sole owner of the property. It looked terrifyingly official. There were stamps from the county clerk. There was a gold seal. There was a signature at the bottom that looked remarkably like mine. A copy of the signature I had used on my student loan applications years ago. Likely lifted and digitally pasted. "We found the emergency clause," my father lied, his voice booming with false authority. "Grandpa signed it 5 years ago. It gives me power of attorney in the event that the heir acts against the interest of the estate. Your refusal to sign the LLC agreement on Saturday? That was the trigger. We filed it this morning. The judge signed off on it immediately." It was a lie. A judge does not sign off on an emergency guardianship in 2 hours without a hearing. The stamps were likely fabricated or obtained through some low-level clerk my father had bribed. The emergency clause did not exist. But to an untrained eye, to a frightened 27-year-old who didn't know the law, this document would look like the end of the world. "You have no standing here anymore," my father continued, crossing his arms. "Technically, you are trespassing on LLC property, but because we are family, and because we are not monsters, we are giving you a grace period." "Friday," Blair cut in. "You have until Friday at 5 in the afternoon." My mother finally spoke up, her voice trembling with that weaponized pity. "It is for the common good. Hannah, the family needs this asset to be secure. You were drowning. Honey, we could see it. We took the burden away from you. Someday, you will thank us." I looked down at the paper again. I looked at the fake signature. I looked at the date stamp, which was dated for 8 o'clock this morning. If I hadn't gone to Arthur Wynne last week, this would have broken me. I would have believed them. I would have believed that my father, the great businessman, had found a legal loophole to crush me. I would have packed my bags and left, convinced I was incompetent. But I knew something they didn't. I knew that at 8 o'clock this morning, the Seabriar Preservation Trust already owned this house. You cannot transfer a title you do not have. You cannot use a power of attorney over Hannah Hunter to seize a house that belongs to a trust. This document in front of me was not a legal order. It was evidence of fraud. My father tapped the table impatiently. "Well, do you have anything to say? Or are you going to finally be reasonable and start packing?" I looked up. I let my eyes widen slightly, feigning the shock they expected. I let my shoulders slump. I dropped the paper as if it burned my fingers. It is already filed?" I whispered. "Recorded and done," my father said, sensing victory. "There is no fighting it. Hannah, lawyers would cost you $50,000 just to open the file, and you would lose anyway. The clause is ironclad." I looked at Blair. She was practically vibrating with triumph. She was already mentally rearranging the furniture. I looked at my mother. She looked relieved, as if her betrayal had been absolved by the official-looking stamp. I took a deep breath. I needed to sell this. I needed them to believe that I was defeated. I needed them to bring the moving trucks. I needed them to commit fully to this crime, so that when the trap snapped, there would be no escape. "Okay," I said. The word hung in the humid air. My father blinked. He had expected a fight. He had expected tears, screaming, perhaps a tantrum. He had prepared his arguments, his threats, his bluster. He wasn't ready for immediate surrender. "Okay," he repeated, suspicious. "I cannot afford a lawyer," I said, keeping my voice low and defeated. "And if Grandpa signed that clause, then he signed it. I cannot fight you." The tension in the room snapped like a cut wire. My father let out a long breath, his chest deflating. A grin spread across his face, a predatory, satisfied grin. "Smart girl," he said. "I knew you would see reason." "I just need time to pack," I said. "There is a lot of stuff." "Friday," my father reiterated, but his tone was lighter now, almost jovial. Friday is the deadline. We have a crew coming in Saturday morning to start the demo on the kitchen wall. So you need to be completely out. Demo? I asked. Blair is right, my mother said, walking over and patting my arm. The kitchen is too closed off. We are going to open it up. It will be beautiful. Hannah, you will see. Right, I said. Beautiful. Blair walked past me, bumping my shoulder intentionally. She picked up the document I had dropped and waved it in the air. I told you it would be easy. Dad, she knows she does not belong here. She walked into the living room. I am going to measure for the new sectional. The white one is going to look amazing against these floors once we refinish them. My father clapped his hands together. All right, we have a schedule. Hannah, start with the upstairs. Anything you do not take by Friday goes into a dumpster. We are not running a storage facility. Understood, I said. And Hannah, he added, turning back to me at the door, leave the keys on the counter when you go. Do not make us chase you for them. I won't, I said. They did not stay long. They did not need to. They had conquered the territory. They spent 20 minutes walking around their new house, pointing out what they would change, what they would throw away, what they would sell. I stood in the kitchen and listened to them dissect my sanctuary. That rug is trash, Blair said from the library. We need to cut those hedges back. They block the curb appeal, my father said from the porch. Maybe we can sell the china, my mother said from the dining room. It is old, but some collectors like that sort of thing. They were vultures, and they thought the carcass was fresh. When they finally walked out to their cars, they were laughing. My father was on his phone, likely calling his contractor to confirm the demolition crew. My mother was smiling, the guilt completely gone, replaced by the excitement of a new project. I watched them drive away. I watched the dust settle in the driveway. I waited 5 full minutes. Then I picked up the document they had left on the table, the notice of title transfer. I walked to the kitchen drawer and pulled out a pair of latex gloves I used for cleaning. I put them on. I picked up the document carefully by the edges. I walked to the scanner I kept in my home office. I scanned every page at the highest resolution. Then I placed the physical document into a plastic Ziploc bag. I sat down at my computer and logged into the secure portal for Calder and Wynn Legacy Group. I uploaded the scans. Then I typed a message to Arthur. They came. They presented a fraudulent title transfer based on a fake emergency clause. They claim to have already filed it, though we know the trust deed blocks it. They have given me until Friday to vacate. They have a demolition crew scheduled for Saturday. I told them, okay, they believe I'm leaving. I hit send. Then I stood up and walked to the calendar on the wall. I took a red marker and circled Friday. They wanted me out by Friday. They wanted a show. I would give them a show. I went upstairs to my bedroom, but not to pack. I went to the closet and pulled out a single, small suitcase. I would pack just enough to make it look convincing. I would leave boxes half filled in the hallway. I would leave the closets open. I would stage the house for their victory lap. I felt a strange sense of calm. The fear was gone. The hesitation was gone. The Hannah who wanted her parents' approval was dead, buried under the weight of that fake document downstairs. They had handed me the murder weapon with their fingerprints all over it. I walked to the window and looked out at the ocean. The tide was coming in, slow and relentless. You cannot stop the tide. You can build walls. You can scream at it. You can pretend it isn't there, but it comes anyway. My family was standing on the beach, building sandcastles, thinking they owned the ocean. They had no idea a tsunami was 4 days away. The silence that filled the house after they left was not the silence of peace. It was the heavy, charged silence of a courtroom just before a verdict is read. I did not move from the kitchen for a long time. I stared at the red circle on the calendar marking Friday, the day my life as a daughter would officially end and my life as a stranger to them would begin. I picked up my phone and dialed Arthur. He answered on the first ring, a rarity for a senior partner, but he knew exactly what was at stake today. They are gone, I said. And Arthur, They left a paper trail. I described the document in detail: the notice of title transfer, the fake emergency clause, the forged signature that looked like a clumsy photocopy of my college loan applications. I told him about the notary who had looked uncomfortable but complicit. I told him about the demolition crew scheduled for Saturday. "They have been very busy," Arthur said, his voice dropping to a tone that was almost predatory. "They have also been incredibly stupid, by presenting you with a fraudulent legal instrument and using it to demand you vacate. They have committed attempted conversion of assets and likely forgery. If they file that document with the county, which they claim they have done, they have committed a felony." "They said it is recorded," I said. "My father was very specific. He said the judge signed off on it this morning." "I am looking at the county registry right now." "Hannah," Arthur replied, the clicking of a keyboard audible in the background. "There is nothing filed against the property today. The last entry is our deed of transfer to the Seabrier Preservation Trust. Your father is bluffing. He is hoping the scary piece of paper will make you run before anyone checks the public record." "He wants me out by Friday at 5, I said. "Then we will give him Friday," Arthur said, "but not the way he expects. We need to secure the perimeter. I am going to dispatch a site administrator from our firm to be there with you on Friday. His name is Mr. Vance. He is a retired federal marshal. He specializes in asset recovery and high-conflict evictions. He will act as the neutral third party." "Do I need to do anything?" "You need to disappear," Arthur instructed. "Not physically, but administratively. Clear the house of any personal financial records, if they decide to snoop before Friday, or if they break in while you are at work. They cannot find the trust documents. They cannot find the new bank accounts. Leave nothing but clothes and the performance." "Understood," I said. "And Hannah," Arthur added, pausing for a beat, "do not engage. If they text, keep your answers short and compliant. If they call, sound defeated. You need to pull them all the way into the room. We need them to assert ownership in front of Mr. Vance. Once they declare they are the owners, we close the trap." I hung up. The game plan was set. I spent the rest of Monday evening sanitizing my life. I went into the home office and opened the safe. I took out the trust agreement, the original deed of transfer, the bank records, and the black notebook where I had logged their abuse. I placed them all into a waterproof courier bag. I drove into town to the 24-hour gym I belonged to but rarely used. I put the bag in my locker, secured it with a heavy-duty padlock, and left. The house was now clean. If my father hired a locksmith to break in while I was at work tomorrow, he would find nothing but a terrified daughter's half-packed boxes. Tuesday and Wednesday were an exercise in psychological endurance. I went to work at Blue Haven as if nothing was happening. I sat in meetings about regulatory compliance, nodding at the right times, taking notes, while my mind was replaying the scene that would unfold in 48 hours. My phone was a constant source of anxiety. Blair was relentless. She had moved past the negotiation phase and was now fully in the occupation phase. "Can you make sure the driveway is clear on Friday?" She texted on Wednesday afternoon. "The moving truck is huge. Also, leave the garage door opener on the counter." I typed back, "I will leave it." "Great," she replied. "Oh, and Mom wants to know if you are taking the dining room table. She says it is technically an antique, so it should stay with the house. But if you really have nowhere to eat, I guess you can take it." They were negotiating my survival. They were debating whether I deserved a table to eat on. "I am leaving the table," I wrote. "I am only taking my clothes and books." "Good call," Blair texted. "It would not fit in an apartment anyway." On Thursday night, I began the physical performance of leaving. I went to the local hardware store and bought 20 cardboard boxes. I brought them into the living room and unfolded them, taping the bottoms with loud, ripping sounds that echoed in the empty house. I packed, but I packed strategically. I filled 3 boxes with old college textbooks I'd been meaning to donate. I filled another 2 with winter coats that were out of season. I took the photos off the mantelpiece, the ones of me and Grandpa, and wrapped them in newspaper. I left the boxes open, scattered around the hallway and the living room. It looked like a surrender. It looked like a retreat. At 7 in the evening, my mother called. "Hannah?" Her voice was soft, laced with that unbearable faux sweetness. "I just wanted to check on you. How is the packing going?" "It is going," I said, letting my voice crack just a little. "It is a lot to do in a few days." "I know, honey," she sighed. "We did not want to rush you, but your father is just so worried about the market, and honestly, once you are settled in a smaller place, you will feel so much lighter. This house, it was an anchor around your neck." "Maybe you are right," I said. "It was a lot of responsibility." "Exactly," she said, seizing on my admission. "You were not ready for it, and that is okay. You are young. You should be having fun, not worrying about roof repairs. We are setting you free, Hannah." Setting me free, that was how she rationalized stripping me of my inheritance and my home. She was not a thief. She was a liberator. "Will you be there tomorrow at 5?" I asked. "Oh yes," she said. "We will all be there. We want to do a final walkthrough with you, just to make sure the condition of the house is acceptable, and then we can collect the keys and say our goodbyes properly." "Okay," I said. "I will be ready." "Get some sleep," she said. "You sound exhausted." I hung up and looked at the phone. I was not exhausted. I was energized by a cold, burning clarity. I walked through the house, turning off the lights one by one. I walked through the dining room where they had threatened me. I walked through the kitchen where they planned to tear down the walls. I went upstairs to the master bedroom. I did not sleep in the bed. I stripped the linens and packed them into a box, leaving the mattress bare. I wanted the room to look cold. I wanted them to walk in and see a corpse of a home, ready for their dissection. I slept on the sofa in the library, wrapped in a single blanket. Friday morning dawned with a heavy gray mist rolling off the ocean. It was perfect. The world felt enclosed, private, as if the universe was narrowing its focus down to this single plot of land. I showered and dressed in a dark navy suit. It was not my usual work attire. It was sharp, tailored, and authoritative. It was armor. At 8 in the morning, a black sedan pulled into the driveway. It was not my family. A man stepped out. He was in his 50s, built like a linebacker who had kept in shape. He had a military haircut and eyes that missed nothing. He carried a sleek briefcase. I opened the door. "Ms. Hunter?" he asked. His voice was gravel and steel. "Yes," I said. "I am Vance," he said. "Arthur sent me. I am your witness." He walked in and surveyed the scene. He looked at the half-packed boxes. He looked at the bare walls. He nodded approvingly. "Good staging," he said. "It looks like a defeat." "They will be here at 5, I said. "I will be parked down the road," Vance explained. "I will enter the property at 5:15. I want them to get comfortable. I want them to feel like they have won. Let them handle the keys. Let them give you orders. Once they have established control, I will come in." "And then?" I asked. "And then we serve them," Vance said. He patted his briefcase. "I have the certified copies of the trust deed, the cease and desist regarding the demolition, and the criminal trespass warnings. I also have a body camera." He tapped a small black square clipped to his belt. "Everything they say will be recorded," he said. "If they threaten you, if they admit to the forgery, we will have it in high definition." He left to position his car out of sight. I spent the day waiting. I did not go to work. I sat in the kitchen, drinking black coffee, watching the fog burn off and the sun break through. The hours ticked by with agonizing slowness. 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. At 4 o'clock, my phone buzzed. "We are leaving the city now." My father texted, "Traffic is light. We might be a bit early. Have the garage remote ready." I did not reply. I stood up and walked to the mirror in the hallway. I looked at myself. I saw the dark circles under my eyes, but I also saw the set of my jaw. I looked like my grandfather. I looked like someone who had weathered the storm and was ready to become the hurricane. I walked to the front door and unlocked it. I propped it open with a heavy stone. I went back to the kitchen and stood by the island. I clasped my hands in front of me. I slowed my breathing. At 4:45, I heard the engines. Not one car, two, and then a third, heavier rumble. I looked out the window. My father's sedan, Blair's convertible, and behind them, a massive yellow moving truck, backing into my driveway, its reverse beeper cutting through the afternoon silence like a countdown. They had brought the movers. They were so confident, so arrogant, that they hadn't even waited for me to leave before bringing in the crew to erase me. I watched my father step out of the car. He looked up at the house and smiled. It was the smile of a conqueror. He walked up the steps, his family trailing behind him. I stayed in the kitchen. I did not go to greet them. I waited for them to come to me. I waited for them to step into the circle. The front door creaked. Footsteps echoed in the hall. "Hannah!" my father's voice boomed. "We are here. Let's get this over with." I took a sip of water. I set the glass down. "I am in the kitchen," I said. My voice was steady. My hands were still. The time for pretending was over. They walked into the room, bringing the noise and chaos of their entitlement with them, and for the first time in a week, I didn't feel afraid. I felt dangerous. The diesel engine of the moving truck idled outside, a low mechanical growl that vibrated through the floorboards of the kitchen. It was the sound of my family's arrogance, loud and impossible to ignore. My father stood in the center of the room, his hands on his hips, surveying the space like a general who had just successfully annexed a new territory. "All right," he announced, his voice projecting over the hum of the refrigerator. "Let's make this efficient. The crew is charging by the hour. Hannah, are these the boxes?" He pointed to the stack of 20 cardboard boxes I had arranged in the hallway. They were filled with old coats and textbooks, debris I had been meaning to discard for years, but to him, they represented my entire life being packed up and shipped away. "That is everything," I said, leaning against the granite island. "Good," he said. He turned to the hallway where the front door stood open. "Hey, start with these boxes in the hall, and be careful with the walls. We are repainting next week, but I do not want gouges in the plaster." Two large men in blue uniforms lumbered into the house. They looked bored and tired, indifferent to the emotional undercurrents of the room. They picked up the boxes, their boots heavy on the hardwood. Blair breezed past them, holding her phone up as if filming a vlog. She walked into the kitchen, ignoring me completely, and went straight to the window. "Okay, so once the truck moves, we can see the sightlines for the pool," she said to the air, or perhaps to a follower count that existed only in her head. She turned to my mother, who was hovering nervously by the pantry. "Mom, did you bring the champagne? We should toast when the house is empty." "It is in the car," my mother said, offering me a quick, guilty glance. "Hannah, do you have a place to stay tonight? We can pay for a motel if you need one." "I have a place," I said. My father clapped his hands. "Keys. Hannah, where are the keys? The master set, the shed key, and the garage remote." I looked at the clock on the microwave. It was 5:14 in the afternoon. "They are right here," I said. Reaching into my pocket, I pulled out a single silver key. It was the key to the back door, a useless spare. I held it in my closed fist. "Well?" He held out his hand, palm up. "Hand them over. Let's close this chapter." I heard a car door slam outside. Not a truck door, a heavy, solid sedan door. I looked out the window. Vance was walking up the driveway. He moved with a terrifying purpose. He was not rushing, but his stride was long and ate up the ground. He adjusted his suit jacket, checking the button. "Who is that?" Blair asked, looking out the window. "Is that the architect?" My father squinted. "I didn't hire an architect yet. Maybe it is the insurance adjuster." Vance walked up the porch steps. The movers were coming out with another load of boxes. Vance held up a hand, his palm flat and authoritative. "Put them down," he said. His voice was not loud, but it cut through the noise of the idling truck like a knife. The movers stopped. They looked at each other, then at the man in the suit, who looked like he used to break people for a living. They set the boxes down on the porch. Vance stepped into the hallway. He walked straight into the kitchen. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Who the hell are you?" my father demanded, stepping forward to block Vance's path. "This is private property. We are in the middle of a move." Vance stopped. He looked at my father, then at my mother, then at Blair. Finally, he looked at me. He nodded once. "My name is Marcus Vance," he said. "I am the site administrator and legal representative for the Seabrier Preservation Trust." My father blinked. "The what?" "The Seabrier Preservation Trust," Vance repeated, enunciating every syllable. "The legal entity that owns this property, and I am here to inquire why you are removing assets from the premises without the authorization of the trustee." My father let out a harsh, incredulous laugh. "Buddy, you are confused. I am the owner. Well, the Hunter Family LLC is the owner. I have the title transfer right here." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out the fraudulent document he had slammed on my table on Monday. He waved it in Vance's face. "See this?" my father spat. "Title transfer, recorded, judge approved. Now get out of my house before I call the police." Vance did not flinch. He did not even look at the paper. He calmly set his briefcase on the kitchen island, right next to where I was standing. He clicked the latches open. "That document is a forgery," Vance said. His tone was conversational, as if commenting on the weather, and a poor one at that. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a blue folder. He opened it and extracted a document with a raised, crimped seal and a verifiable county recording stamp. "This," Vance said, placing the paper on the granite, "is the deed of transfer, dated May 25th. It transfers the property from Hannah Hunter to the Seabrier Preservation Trust. It was recorded at 9 in the morning on that day. The trust is an irrevocable entity." My father stared at the paper. "May 25th? That was last week." "Correct," Vance said, "which means that when you drafted your little quit-claim deed on Monday, Hannah Hunter no longer owned the house. She could not have transferred it to your LLC, even if she wanted to. You cannot give away what you do not have." "That is impossible," my father stammered. He snatched the paper from the counter. His eyes scanned the lines, frantic, searching for a flaw. "Irrevocable? What does that mean?" "It means it cannot be changed," Vance said. "It means the house is locked. It means the trust owns it, and the trust documents explicitly state that the property is for the sole benefit of the primary beneficiary." "Who is the beneficiary?" Blair asked, her voice shrill. "Hannah Hunter," Vance said. The silence that followed was absolute. The idling truck outside seemed to fade away. My mother put a hand to her mouth. Blair looked from Vance to me, her eyes wide with a dawning, horrific realization. My father turned on me. His face was a mottled red, the veins in his neck bulging. "You," he hissed. "You did this. You went behind my back." "I protected my home," I said. My voice was calm, steady, matching Vance's energy. "This is fraud," my father shouted, slamming his hand on the counter. "She tricked us. She acted like she was leaving. That is entrapment." "It is not entrapment to let someone believe their own lies." Vance corrected him. He pointed to the body camera on his belt. A small red light was blinking. "By the way, sir, I should inform you that this interaction is being recorded for legal purposes. You just admitted to creating a document to transfer a title you knew was contested. You also attempted to evict a lawful tenant through intimidation. That is constructive fraud and harassment." My father froze. He looked at the camera. He looked at the fake document still in his hand. He realized, in that split second, that he was holding a felony. He dropped the paper as if it were radioactive. I didn't know," he stammered, his bluster evaporating instantly. "We thought—" "Hannah said—" "Hannah said nothing," Vance said. "Hannah said, 'Okay,' which, in this context, was simply an acknowledgement of your statement, not an agreement to your terms." The foreman of the moving crew walked into the kitchen. He was a large man with a clipboard. He looked at my father, then at Vance. "Look," the foreman said, I do not know what is going on here, but the meter is running. Are we moving this stuff or not? Vance turned to the foreman. Sir, you have been hired by an individual who has no legal authority over this property. If you remove any items from this house, you will be liable for theft of trust assets. The trust did not hire you, and the trust is not paying you. The foreman looked at my father. Is that true? Is this your house? My father opened his mouth, but no words came out. He looked at the deed on the counter. He looked at the trust seal. He knew he was beaten. The deal is off, my father whispered. Right, the foreman said. He turned around and yelled down the hallway. Boys, drop the boxes. We are leaving. Wait, Blair screamed. You cannot just leave. My stuff is in the car. We have a contractor coming tomorrow. Cancel him, Vance said. He will not be granted entry. I have already flagged the property with the local precinct. Any unauthorized personnel attempting to alter the structure will be arrested for vandalism. The sound of the movers retreating was the sweetest music I had ever heard. The heavy boots stomped back out. The ramp of the truck clattered shut. The engine revved, and the vehicle pulled away, taking with it the threat that had hung over me for weeks. My family stood in the kitchen. They looked small. They looked stripped of their power. My mother was crying now. Soft, terrified sobs. Hannah, how could you? We are your family. Family does not forge documents to steal a home, I said. My father looked at me. The anger was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating fear. You know you cannot afford this place. Hannah, trust or no trust. The taxes will kill you. You need us. The trust is funded, I said. Grandpa left a maintenance stipend. I added my savings. And the trust is invested. I can live here for the rest of my life without asking you for a dime. But what about me? Blair asked. She sounded like a child who had been told Christmas was canceled. I told everyone I was getting the house. I posted about the retreat. I have people signed up. Refund them, I said. You can't do this, she shrieked, her face twisting into a mask of ugly entitlement. It is not fair. Grandma loved me too. You manipulated them. You are a snake. I am the trustee, I corrected her. I walked over to the counter and picked up the keys, the real keys, that had been sitting in the fruit bowl the whole time. Mr. Vance, I said, please escort these guests off the property. They are trespassing. Vance stepped forward. He did not touch them, but his presence was a wall pushing them toward the door. You heard the lady, Vance said. Time to go. My father looked at me one last time. There was no love in his eyes. There was no regret. There was only the shock of a man who had walked into a room expecting a lamb and found a wolf. This isn't over, he muttered. It is, I said. Read the deed, Dad. It is irrevocable. They walked out. My mother trailed behind, looking back at me with wide, tear-filled eyes, waiting for me to crack, to apologize, to call them back. I stood still. I did not blink. Blair stopped at the door. She looked at the boxes in the hall, the decoy boxes filled with trash. She kicked one, sending a pile of old college chemistry notes spilling across the floor. I hate you, she hissed. I know, I said. Drive safe. The door closed. I stood in the silence. It was real silence this time. The truck was gone. The family was gone. Vance walked back into the kitchen. He let out a long breath and cracked a small smile. That went well, he said. Yes, I said. It did. I will file the incident report with the firm, he said. If they try to come back, we have the video, but they won't come back. Your father knows what a felony looks like. He is going to be too busy covering his tracks to bother you. Thank you, Mr. Vance, I said. Just doing my job. Ms. Hunter, he said. Or should I say, Madam Trustee. He left a few minutes later. I locked the door behind him. I slid the deadbolt into place. I walked back into the kitchen and picked up the notice of title transfer my father had left behind. I walked to the trash can and dropped it in. I was alone. The house was mine. The sun was setting. casting long shadows across the floorboards that my sister wanted to rip out. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the smell of old cedar and salt air. It was the first breath of my life that truly belonged to me. The silence I had fought so hard to win lasted exactly 12 hours. By Saturday morning, the siege had shifted from physical territory to digital warfare. My phone, which I had left on the kitchen counter, began to vibrate with a relentless, manic intensity. It was not a direct assault this time. It was a campaign of attrition. My mother was the first wave. She did not text. She left voicemails. I listened to them while drinking coffee, staring out at the ocean that was legally, irrevocably, mine. Her voice shifted with every message, a masterclass in emotional volatility. In the first message, at 8 a.m, she was weeping. "Hannah, I cannot believe you would be so cruel. Blair is devastated. She is in her room crying her eyes out. You have broken this family apart over a house. Is a pile of wood and brick really worth losing your mother?" By 10 a.m, the tears had dried, replaced by a cold, sharp guilt. "Your father is seeing a cardiologist today. His blood pressure is through the roof. If something happens to him, Hannah, that is on you. You need to fix this. Call the lawyer, undo the trust. It is the only way to redeem yourself." I did not reply. I deleted the messages. My father took a different approach. At noon, an email arrived in my inbox. The subject line was, "Notice of intent to litigate." It was not from a lawyer. It was written by him. Filled with legal jargon he had clearly Googled. He threatened to sue me for breach of implied contract and familial alienation of assets. He claimed that my okay on Monday constituted a verbal contract that superseded the deed. It was desperate. It was pathetic. But it was also dangerous because it showed he was still looking for a loophole, any crack in the armor he could pry open. Then came Blair. My cousin, Sarah, whom I hadn't spoken to in years, sent me a screenshot from Facebook. Blair had posted a long, rambling status update. Heartbroken today, it read, "You think you know people, but then they stab you in the back. My own sister manipulated our elderly grandparents and scammed me out of my inheritance. She kicked our parents out of their own family home. I am homeless and broke because of her greed. Please send prayers for my family during this nightmare." The comments were flooding in. Aunts, uncles, and distant cousins were piling on. How terrible. I always knew Hannah was the quiet, sneaky one. Stay strong. Blair. They were trying to isolate me. They wanted to make me a pariah so that the pressure of social exile would force me to capitulate. I sat at my computer. I could have ignored it. I could have taken the high road. But Arthur Wynne had told me that silence is a weapon, and sometimes you have to pull the trigger. I did not post a public status. I did not argue in the comments. Instead, I composed a single email. I addressed it to every family member who had commented on Blair's post, my aunts, my uncles, the cousins who were sending prayers. Subject: clarification regarding the Hunter estate. I attached 2 files. The first was the audio recording from the kitchen, where my father admitted to forging the emergency clause and threatened to have me declared incompetent. The second was the screenshot of the text message from Blair sending me the link to the document forging service. I wrote a short message. "I believe there is some confusion regarding the events of this week. Please listen to the attached audio where Dad admits to creating fraudulent documents to evict me from my own home." Also attached is Blair attempting to help me forge legal papers. The house was left to me legally. I simply protected it from fraud. I hit send. Within 20 minutes, Blair's post was deleted. My aunt texted me an apology. The smear campaign did not just stall, it imploded. I was feeling a grim sense of satisfaction when my phone rang. It was Arthur. "Ms. Hunter," he said. His voice was serious, lacking his usual dry humor. "We have found something. I had my forensic accountants look into your family's financials. We wanted to see if they had the liquidity to mount a real lawsuit, just to be safe." "And?" I asked. "They do not," Arthur said. "In fact, they are hemorrhaging money, but that is not the headline. The headline is why they were so desperate for the house.
Why? I asked.
Your sister, Arthur said. Blair Hunter. Did you know she started a lifestyle brand 2 years ago? She mentioned it, I said. She said it was doing well. It is not, Arthur corrected. It has accumulated $150,000 in debt. She took out high-interest business loans. But here's the kicker. Your father co-signed for them, and he put up a personal guarantee. I felt the blood drain from my face. The loans are in default, Arthur continued. The creditors are circling. They have already leveraged your parents' primary residence. The equity in Seabriar Cove was not just a bonus for them. Hannah, it was their lifeline. They intended to flip the house immediately to pay off the sharks and save your father his credit. So they were going to sell it, I whispered. They were going to sell Grandpa his house to pay for Blair's failed influencer career. Precisely, Arthur said. The renovation plans, the retreat idea, that was all smoke. They needed a quick sale. That is why the pressure was so intense. They are on a clock. I hung up the phone and sat in the library, surrounded by the smell of old paper and dust. I felt sick. It wasn't just greed. It was survival. They were drowning, and they had decided to use me as their life raft, even if it meant holding my head underwater. I looked around the room. My eyes landed on the bookshelf where my grandfather kept his favorite nautical histories. There was a hollow sound when I walked past a particular section of the floorboards, a loose board I had known about since I was a child. I knelt down. I pried the board up with my fingertips. There was a small metal box nestled in the insulation. I had hidden candy there when I was 10, but as I lifted the box out, I realized it was heavier than I remembered. I opened it. Inside, on top of a few old silver dollars, was a white envelope. To Hannah, it read in my grandfather's shaky handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it. The date on the letter was 3 years ago, shortly after his diagnosis. My dearest Hannah, if you are reading this, I am gone, and the wolves are at the door. I love your mother, but I am not blind. She has never understood the value of things, only the price, and your father sees the world as a transaction. They will try to take this place from you. They will tell you it is for your own good. They will tell you that you are not strong enough. I am writing this to tell you that you are the strongest of them all. You are the only one who ever listened to the house. You are the only one who ever fixed a leak instead of calling a man to do it. I am leaving you the house not as a gift, but as a trust. Guard it. Do not let them turn my sanctuary into a bank account. I have spoken to a lawyer named Arthur Wynne. He knows the situation. If it gets bad, go to him. But I hope you never have to. Love, Grandpa. I pressed the letter to my chest and cried. It wasn't the polite, silent crying I had done at the funeral. It was a deep, racking sob that shook my entire body. He knew. He had seen the future. He had known that his own daughter and son-in-law would try to devour his legacy, and he had armed me from the grave. The emergency clause my father had faked. Grandpa had never signed it, but he had prepared a real defense. I wiped my eyes. The tears were done. Now, there was only resolve. An hour later, my phone rang again. It was my mother. I stared at the screen. I debated letting it go to voicemail, but the letter had given me a new kind of strength. I answered. Hello, Mother, I said. There was silence on the other end. No crying, no yelling, just the heavy breathing of someone who has run out of options. Hannah, she said. Her voice was small, stripped of all its artifice. We need to talk, please. I am listening, I said. We are in trouble, she admitted. It was the first honest thing she had said to me in years. Serious trouble. The bank is calling. We need to figure something out. There is nothing to figure out regarding the house, I said. The house is gone. Mom, it belongs to the trust. I know, she whispered. We know. We saw the email you sent to the family. We know we lost, but we need to meet, just to close this, to discuss how we move forward as a family, if there is even a family left. You want to negotiate, I said.
Yes, she said. Please.
I looked at the letter on the table. I looked at the red circle on the calendar. Okay, I said, but we do not meet at your house, and we do not meet here. Anywhere, she said. Name the place. There is a conference room at the library in town, I said. Neutral ground, public, tomorrow at 10. We will be there, she said. And Mom? I added. Yes? Tell Dad to bring the loan documents, I said. The ones for Blair is business. I know about the debt.
She gasped, a sharp, terrified sound. How?
Tomorrow at 10, I said.
I hung up.
I stood up and walked to the window. The sun was setting, casting a long golden path across the water. They were coming to negotiate a surrender. They thought maybe, just maybe, I would take pity on them. They thought that because I was their daughter, I would use the house to bail them out of their own mistakes. They were wrong. I was going to the meeting not to save them, but to ensure they could never threaten me again. I was going to use their desperation to build a wall so high that they would never be able to climb over it. Grandpa had left me the sword. Tomorrow, I would use it. The conference room at the public library was a glass-walled fishbowl, sterile and exposed, smelling faintly of floor wax and old glue. It was the perfect setting for the final act of this tragedy. Transparent, cold, and utterly devoid of the warmth my family used to fake so well. I arrived 10 minutes early. I sat at the head of the laminate table, flanked by Arthur Wynne and Mr. Vance. We did not speak. We simply laid out the files. The blue folder containing the trust deed, the red folder containing the evidence of their fraud, and a new, black folder containing the document that would end this forever. At 10 o'clock sharp, they walked in. The change in them was startling. In just 24 hours, the arrogance that had defined my family for decades had evaporated, leaving behind a frantic, sweaty desperation. My father looked 10 years older, his skin gray and pasty. My mother was clutching her purse like a shield, her eyes darting around the room to see if anyone was watching. Blair trailed behind them, wearing oversized sunglasses indoors, looking like a petulant child who had been dragged to the principal's office. They sat on the opposite side of the table. The divide between us was only 3 feet of laminate, but it might as well have been an ocean.
Hannah, my father began, his voice raspy. He cleared his throat and tried to summon a shred of his old authority. I am glad you agreed to meet. We need to find a way to resolve this, for everyone's sake.
I am listening, I said.
Look, he said, leaning forward, clasping his hands.
We made mistakes. I admit that. The pressure, the financial situation, it made us act out of character, but we are still family, and right now, your mother and I are facing ruin, absolute ruin. Blair's business loans have been called in. They are going to take our house, Hannah, your childhood home. That is unfortunate, I said. My tone was not mocking. It was simply factual. We have a proposal, he continued, rushing to get the words out. We know the house is in a trust. We respect that now, but surely, as the trustee, you have the power to liquidate assets if it is in the best interest of the beneficiary. And isn't it in your best interest to not see your parents on the street? We are proposing a split. We sell the house. You take 60%. We take 40%. It pays off the debt. We walk away. You still have over $1 million. Everyone survives. My mother looked at me, tears welling up in her eyes. Please, Hannah, we are begging you. I looked at them. They still didn't get it. They thought this was a negotiation about money. They thought that if they just appealed to my sympathy long enough, I would crack. No, I said. Hannah, be reasonable, Blair snapped, taking off her sunglasses to glare at me. Her eyes were puffy. You do not even need that huge house. You are one person. We are going to lose everything because you are being a selfish brat.
Blair, my father warned, but he did not stop her.
No, Dad, say it, she screamed. She stole it. She manipulated Grandpa and now she's letting us drown. I did not manipulate anyone, I said, my voice cutting through her hysteria. And I am not selling the house, not for 40%, not for 1%. I signaled to Arthur. He slid the red folder across the table.
"What is this?" my father asked.
That, Arthur said, is the full forensic accounting of your current financial status, coupled with the digital footprint of your attempted fraud. We know about the forged emergency clause. We know about the attempt to edit documents online. We know about the text messages soliciting investors for a property you did not own.
My father went pale. He stared at the folder but did not open it.
And, I added, we have the recording of you admitting to the forgery in my kitchen. You recorded that? My father whispered. In the state where the property is located, only one party needs to consent to a recording. Mr. Vance interjected calmly. That party was Ms. Hunter. This evidence is sufficient for a criminal referral, Arthur stated. Forgery of a title document, attempted grand larceny, conspiracy to commit fraud. If we turn this over to the district attorney, you will not just lose your house, you will go to prison. The room went silent. The air conditioning hummed, a low drone that sounded like a countdown. My mother put her face in her hands and began to sob, a quiet, broken sound.
"What do you want?" my father asked. His voice was dead. The fight was gone.
I want peace, I said, and I want to ensure that you never, ever try to come for me or my grandfather's legacy again. I slid the black folder across the table. This is a settlement and release agreement, I explained. It states that you acknowledge the Seabrier Preservation Trust as the sole rightful owner of the property. It states that you waive any and all future claims to the estate. It includes a permanent restraining order preventing you from coming within 500 yards of the property or contacting me for any reason.
"And if we sign?" my father asked.
If you sign, I said, I will not turn the red folder over to the police. I will keep the evidence of your crimes private. You can deal with your debts however you see fit, but you will do it without me.
"And if we don't?" Blair challenged, though her voice wavered.
Then Mr. Vance walks this red folder to the police station across the street immediately, I said, and the trust will fund a civil lawsuit against you for damages that will bankrupt you before the criminal trial even starts.
"But the money," my mother wept. "Hannah, what about the debt? What about us?"
That is not my problem, I said. You spent years telling me I was incompetent. You spent years telling me I couldn't manage my own life. It is time for you to manage yours.
"I hate you," Blair whispered. "I wish you were never born." "And there it is," I said. "The truth."
I looked at Blair. You never wanted a relationship with me. You wanted a sponsor. You never loved the house. You wanted a backdrop for your photos. You didn't care about Grandpa. You cared about his wallet. He was an old miser, Blair shouted, losing all control. He sat in that house and rotted while we struggled. He owed us. That house was supposed to be my payday. I deserved it.
The confession hung in the air, ugly and raw. Even my father looked away, ashamed.
Thank you for clarifying that, I said. Now, sign the papers.
My father picked up the pen. His hand was shaking so badly he could barely hold it. He signed the release. He passed it to my mother. She signed it, blotting the paper with her tears. She passed it to Blair.
Blair stared at the paper. She looked at me with pure venom, but she looked at the red folder, and she knew I wasn't bluffing. She scratched her name onto the line. Arthur took the document back. He checked the signatures. He notarized them on the spot.
"It is done," Arthur said.
I stood up. One last thing, I said. The trust has a special clause I activated this morning. It is called the disinheritance mandate. It states that if any family member attempts to contact the trustee or enter the property after signing this release, the trust is automatically mandated to donate $10,000 to a charity in their name. So, Blair sneered, you think we care about charity? The charity, I smiled coldly, is the Legal Defense Fund for victims of financial abuse. Every time you bother me, you will be funding the fight against people like you. My father looked at me, For a second, I saw a flicker of something that looked like respect, or maybe it was fear. He realized, finally, that he hadn't raised a victim. He had raised a survivor. "Goodbye, Dad," I said.
"Hannah,"
he started, but he stopped. There was nothing left to say. They stood up and walked out of the conference room. They walked out of the library. They walked out of my life. I watched them go through the glass walls. 3 small, defeated figures stepping into the harsh light of the parking lot to face a ruin of their own making. I sat there for a moment, listening to the silence. It didn't feel lonely. It felt clean.
"You did well, Hannah," Arthur said quietly.
I did, I agreed. I drove back to Seabriar Cove alone. The sun was high overhead, turning the ocean into a sheet of diamonds. I pulled into the driveway. The "for sale" sign my father had mentally placed there was gone. The demolition crew was gone. The noise was gone. I walked up the steps and unlocked the door. I walked into the living room and opened the windows. The ocean breeze rushed in, chasing away the stagnant air of the last week. I could smell the salt, the pine, and the cedar. I walked to the mantelpiece and placed the photo of Grandpa back in its rightful spot. I wasn't rich in the way my family wanted to be. I didn't have a lifestyle brand. I didn't have their approval. But as I stood there, listening to the rhythm of the waves crashing against the shore, I realized I had something far more valuable. I had a sanctuary that could not be breached. I had a legacy that was safe. And for the first time in 27 years, I knew exactly who I was. I was Hannah Hunter, I was the trustee, and I was home. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It was a long journey from that scared girl in the kitchen to the woman standing on the porch, but I hope it reminds you that sometimes the quietest moves are the most powerful. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Please leave a comment below with your city or country, so we can see how far this story has traveled. And if you enjoyed seeing justice served, please subscribe to the Lila Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button to help share this victory with more people. Stay safe, and remember to protect your peace.